Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. House lawmakers are returning to Capitol Hill. They're aiming to end a partial government shutdown that started over the weekend. Democrats have rejected fast-tracking the funding bills, and that's slowing the process until at least Tuesday. 2 more people arrested for storming a church in Minnesota during a Sunday service. We have what Attorney General Pam Bondi said to the protesters. U.S. manufacturing showing its strongest growth since 2022. What the latest numbers tell us. The Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt has reopened under the ceasefire deal. Limited travel is starting. We have the details. Pennsylvania's most famous groundhog reveals his prediction. The annual tradition goes back more than a century.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Monday, February 2nd. I'm Kevin Hogan. A partial government shutdown that kicked in over the weekend is now expected to last until at least Tuesday. Republicans aim to fast-track a vote, but Democrats want a full debate. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
The U.S. House back in session this week, lawmakers immediately facing the task of reopening the government after a partial weekend shutdown. Senators approved a last-minute deal to fund most of the government. They temporarily extended DHS funding to give more time for lawmakers to negotiate changes to ICE policy.
Our intention is by Tuesday, all agencies of the federal government, except for that one, and then we'll have 2 weeks of good faith negotiations to figure it out.
But Republicans are expected to have to rely on only their party to reopen. House Democrats made clear they don't want to use the 2-week period to find a bipartisan solution on how ICE operates, instead demanding immediate changes.
Body cameras should be mandatory. Masks should come off. Judicial warrants should absolutely be required, consistent with the Constitution in our view.
I'm not just a no, I'm a firm no, and I'm going to advocate with colleagues that they vote no.
Without Democrat support, Republicans cannot lose more than a single vote to approve the funding package due to their bare-bones majority.
The Democrats play games with this, and I think it's very unfortunate because what they're doing is they're jeopardizing services to the American people. When you're talking about the Department of Homeland Security, remember what's included in that. You have TSA agents for the airports. You have the Coast Guard. You have FEMA. We're in the middle of a winter storm disaster on the East Coast. We can't play games with this.
The House Speaker and other Republicans have indicated support for changes to ICE, like mandating that immigration officers wear body cameras. But the demand to remove masks and expand warrants will be tougher to address. Johnson argued that masks protect agents from harassment, and expanding warrants could make immigration enforcement more difficult. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And breaking just now, President Trump says he agreed on a trade deal with India. Trump announced the agreement on Truth Social following a call with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Trump said India agreed to stop buying Russian oil and will buy more from the United States. He also said India might buy oil from Venezuela. In return, Trump said the U.S. will charge a reduced tariff on Indian goods. The tariff will now drop from 25% to 18%. Trump said Modi committed to buy more than $500 billion in U.S. products. He listed energy, technology, and agricultural goods. Arizona authorities announced a new investigation today into the disappearance of Savannah Guthrie's mother. Guthrie is a co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. Officials say the case is now being treated as a crime. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, was last seen on the evening of January 31st at her home in the Tucson area. Her family reported her missing around noon Sunday. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed the timeline. Speaking this morning, Nanos called the home a crime scene. He said investigators believe a crime occurred, adding that Guthrie did not leave on her own. Officials say this is no longer a search operation. They're treating it as a criminal investigation. Nanos said Guthrie needs daily medication to survive. He described her as mentally sharp. The FBI has been notified. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is also assisting. We will keep you updated as the investigation unfolds. 2 more people have been arrested after a group stormed into a church in Minnesota during a Sunday service last month. The Justice Department is promising prosecution. Attorney General Pam Bondi made the announcement today, saying if you riot in a place of worship, we will find you. It's unclear what charges the 2 protesters face, but the DOJ said previously they're investigating federal civil rights violations over the church service disruption. A group of anti-ICE protesters stormed into City's church in St. Paul last month, shouting "ICE out" and interrupting the service. President Trump has called for jail time for the protesters and urged a broader investigation. Former CNN host Don Lemon was also arrested and charged with federal civil rights crimes for live streaming the protest inside the church. A showdown over ICE in Oregon. Portland's mayor recently said federal officials should depart the city after immigration agents launched tear gas at protesters. Portland Mayor Keith Wilson said the incident impacted what he called a peaceful daytime protest. Wilson called on those who continue to work for ICE to resign. He vowed that Portland will stand up for, quote, our immigrant neighbors. The mayor also praised protesters in what he called the face of federal overreach. The Portland police say officers monitored protesters near the ICE building on Saturday after a large crowd gathered in the area. ICE has not yet responded to an Epoch Times request for comment. Violent crime in the nation's capital is dropping. Washington went for 3 weeks without a recorded homicide this year. During his campaign, President Trump made it a goal of his to lower crime in D.C. According to the Washington Post, compared to the same time last year, there have been almost 10 times less homicides this year. Carjackings have also plummeted, dropping 5-fold compared with the first month of last year. Local officials take the credit, saying the low crime rate is a result of their work. Trump previously said the surge in federal law enforcement resolved the capital's crime problems. Colombia's leader, Gustavo Petro, is heading to Washington to meet President Trump tomorrow. The meeting is likely to focus on drugs. Colombia is the world's largest cocaine producer, and there is more cocaine consumed in America than anywhere else in the world. Trump and Petro have been trading accusations for months. Trump accused Petro of doing nothing to stop the production of drugs in Colombia, calling him, quote, an illegal drug leader. The White House has also said it could take military action against Colombia. Petro has criticized Trump and the administration's immigration policies, but ahead of the meeting, the Colombian president took steps to ease tensions with Washington. He announced the resumption of migrant deportation flights from the U.S. to Colombia. Petro's visit comes before Colombia's May elections. And staying on Trump's international ambitions, the president says he's optimistic the U.S. will make a deal with Cuba. And the president has some words of warning for Canada on China. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that, plus a major World Trade Organization decision on U.S.-China trade.
President Trump yesterday discussed the effects of Maduro's capture on Cuba and the blockade that preceded it.
Well, Cuba's a failing nation. It has been for a long time, but now it doesn't have Venezuela to prop it up. So we're talking to the people from Cuba, the highest people in Cuba, to see what happens.
Trump says he wants Cubans who fled to the U.S. to be able to return.
They have their family there. They haven't been able to see them in years, many, many years. So I think we're going to make a deal with Cuba. It's in bad shape. Cuba's in bad shape. Cuba has a humanitarian problem.
Cuba has long relied on Venezuela for energy. In 2025, Venezuela supplied roughly 1/3 of the island's daily oil needs.
They have no money, they have no oil. Venezuela, they live off Venezuelan money and oil.
Trump said last week tariffs would be imposed on imports from countries that supply Cuba with oil.
Turning to Canada, President Trump on Saturday said the U.S. would respond in a significant way if Canada proceeds with the trade agreement it negotiated with China.
If they do a deal with China, yeah, we'll do something very substantial. Because we can have a great relationship with China, President Xi, but we don't want China to take over Canada.
Trump last week said he would impose 100% tariffs on Canada if it follows through on a trade deal with China. And an update from the World Trade Organization, the U.S. says WTO rules are inadequate after the group sided with China in a dispute. The WTO has issued findings that upheld China's claims that certain U.S. tax credit programs discriminated against Chinese products. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer responded sharply, saying current WTO rules fail to address China's massive and harmful excess capacity, especially in energy technology. Greer said the ruling penalizes the U.S. for defending industries Beijing has targeted for global dominance, while ignoring the damage caused by China's industrial policies. China filed the challenge in 2024, arguing that IRA tax credits unfairly excluded Chinese-made goods. A WTO panel was established later that year, ultimately siding with Beijing.
Under WTO rules, subsidies for domestic goods are allowed only under narrow exceptions, such as being necessary to protect public morals. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
President Trump defends the United Nations amid a financial challenge. The head of the UN recently warned that its headquarters in New York might have to close by the summer due to insufficient funding. Trump told Politico that the organization won't leave New York. The president reportedly says the UN has significant potential to maintain peace in the world after he leaves office. The head of the organization is calling on nations to pay their fees. As of late 2025, over $1.8 billion was still owed. Nearly $1.5 billion was from the United States. Gaza's Rafah border crossing with Egypt reopened Monday for limited traffic, a key step under the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. Only a small number of people are expected to cross at first. Egyptian officials say about 50 Palestinians will be allowed to travel in each direction on the first day, with no goods permitted through the crossing. Before the war, Rafah was Gaza's main gateway to the outside world. Under the ceasefire, Israel controls the area between the crossing and Gaza's population centers. European Union monitors are overseeing operations, with Israeli and Egyptian authorities vetting travelers. Gaza health officials say roughly 20,000 people in need of medical care hope to leave through Rafah. Egypt says 150 hospitals are prepared to receive patients. Violence continued everywhere in Gaza today. Israel said it was reviewing reports of a deadly naval strike. Coming up, your bottom line and how it's affected by the next chair of the Federal Reserve. President Trump nominated Kevin Warsh for the job. Who is he? And what's his stance on interest rates and the adversarial regime in Beijing? A CEO of a renowned private equity firm with some answers. A Chinese national is in the spotlight after the FBI and Las Vegas police raid 2 homes, uncovering a possible illegal biological laboratory. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is traveling to Cape Canaveral today to visit NASA and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. He'll deliver remarks to its workforce and leaders alongside Bezos. Let's tune in.
The world has ever seen that can only be done at scale in the United States of America. We will unleash our companies, unleash industry, unleash the competitive spirit that allows America to come out on top. When we compete, we win. When we innovate, we win. When we confront the status quo, we win. And I don't know if you know this, but we have a commander-in-chief who's pretty interested in winning. No more business as usual, which I know, Mr. Bezos, is music to your ears. You've never done business as usual. And at the War Department, business as usual is over. Our job is to unleash space pioneers, just like we are unleashing our warfighters. And President Trump, in service of that, has some core principles. First, we are putting America and Americans first. Our citizens and our workers first, setting the conditions for you to succeed, securing our people in our homeland and our hemisphere. It's long overdue. Second is peace through strength. At the War Department, we are the Strength Department. Our job is to be the hammer when necessary, but hopefully never have to use it. It's called deterrence. But if we must use it, to fight, we will fight to win, overwhelmingly. And the third principle is common sense, which, as you all know, is not so common in Washington. But in the Trump administration, when you look at the problem we have as a nation, we have to build at scale and at speed, and that's vital. It's common sense, so we have to go faster and empowering our fastest runners. You will see those common sense principles applied at the War Department in three simple ways. One, we're reviving the warrior ethos. We're eliminating the distractions and the debris. No more DEI, no more dudes in dresses, no more climate change worship or social justice or political correctness. We're done with all of that. We're just unleashing the warfighter to be lethal, trained, disciplined, accountable, and ready. And when you allow them to do that, they're really good at their job, as an indicted criminal in Venezuela found out about a month ago. We are allowing commanders to be commanders again, leaders to be leaders. And what they say back to us is the most affirming words we could ever hear. Those commanders are saying, we've never felt this supported before, ever in our time in command. Under President Trump and under the War Department, you're allowing us to use the authorities to go out and do what we need to do, clearing out the debris. That's music to my ears. That's my job, to serve those who serve, allowing our warfighters to be even more capable. Second, we're rebuilding our military. That's why we're on the Arsenal of Freedom tour. That's why we're here in Florida. We're going across the country for a couple of months, talking to industry, large like this one, and small. We need all of them. And we need you to move fast, at scale, at cost, to outcompete our adversaries, to rebuild our arsenal of freedom. President Trump did it in his first term, and we're doing it again. As you may have heard, the One Big Beautiful Bill provided the War Department an historic down payment of $150 billion to supercharge President Trump's defense capabilities. He has announced the goal to spend $1.5 trillion for our national defense in 2027. That is a massive message to the rest of the world that American strength is not going anywhere anytime soon. We will dominate in every domain. That One Big Beautiful Bill also provided $25 billion for the Golden Dome for America, revolutionizing our homeland defense through cutting-edge space-based capabilities, which we're going to need. We're talking about a vigilant constellation of next-generation sensors and satellites that will see every threat from every corner of the globe, paired with a network of space-based interceptors ready to neutralize any ballistic missile, any hypersonic weapon, any drone, long before it threatens our homeland. The kind of protection President Trump has promised the American people and the War Department will deliver. That is how we establish total orbital supremacy. That is how we guarantee the safety and security of the American people. Space Force's General Gutlein has done a fantastic job so far leading the charge. He knows the path of what's expected for Golden Dome. I get briefed monthly on its progress. This is not something you see, President Reagan helped defeat the Soviets by casting a vision of SDI, of a dome. President Trump, given the companies we have in this country, like this one, can now make that vision a reality for the American people, a huge conundrum for our adversaries who are counting on a whole different dynamic. We will continue to work with our partners because we have to dominate the space domain. That means we'll ensure that we keep building rockets and engines and landers that you make here at scale and at speed. Third, we're reestablishing deterrence. So we're reviving the warrior ethos, rebuilding the military, and you have to reestablish deterrence if you've lost it. Whether it was the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan, a sin and a shame on our country, or what happened on October 7th with Hamas in Israel, or the war in Ukraine that never would have happened if President Trump was president, or the radicals who shot at our ships and we didn't respond, or the invasion of our southwest border of tens of millions of illegals. The world saw an open invitation to challenge America under the previous administration. It didn't feel like America was prepared. Biden was asleep and Lloyd Austin was AWOL. So the first thing we did at the War Department was reestablish deterrence. It started on day one. We locked down the southern border. We've gone 8 months with 0 crossings at the southern border. Turns out we didn't need new authorities, we just needed a new president. Credit to Customs and Border Protection, our law enforcement partners, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and others who do a very difficult job every day. The War Department was proud to stand beside them since day one. We also reestablished deterrence through our efforts with the Houthis, Operation Rough Rider. Now, from the beginning, some people thought, the Houthis? Why do we have to deal with the Houthis? Well, it's because the Biden administration allowed Islamists to shoot at our commercial and military ships, and we didn't respond. All the way back to the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, we've understood that free navigation of the seas is a core tenet of the United States of America. You don't shoot at American ships. Yet Joe Biden allowed those attacks to go on as if it was a new normal, a new status quo. Well, we responded, and after 50 days of relentless bombing, the Houthis cried uncle. They said, okay, we won't shoot at your ships anymore. They were dying, literally and figuratively, to make a deal. And American ships now in that region and all around the world sail freely. Look at Iran and what President Trump said about their nuclear capabilities. Iran will never have a nuclear bomb. They didn't want to pay attention or believe him. So 7 beautiful B-2s flew 37 hours and dropped 14 precision munitions on top of their nuclear facilities, undetected, flawless, in the middle of the night, something only America, the United States of America, can do. Peace through strength, deterrence in action. We see the same thing with narco-terrorists in our own hemisphere. How long have leaders been talking about a war on drugs or taking drugs off our streets? Well, for a long time, it was simply a catch and release program, a law enforcement function that didn't work. But these narco-terrorists, designated terrorist organizations, targeted our communities, our kids, and our people in our country. They knew exactly what they were doing. So instead of catch and release, we let them know, if you're going to sail in your drugs toward our country in international waters, we will target your drug boats and we will sink them. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, there haven't been many boats sunk recently because we can't find any boats to sink. And I'll pause for a minor announcement. As work continues, as it should, don't stop for a speech. You see, no one wants to get in a narco boat anymore. And that's the whole point. And then on January 3rd, the whole world saw what our military is capable of at every echelon. When we brought the indicted nominal leader of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, from the most fortified house, in the most fortified location, inside their biggest fort, in their capital city, in the middle of the night, without them knowing we were there until 3 minutes before. The most sophisticated single raid in the history of the planet. No other president before President Trump would have had the guts to make that call. And no other military in the world has the ability to do it. I remember when Nicolas Maduro mocked us and said, "I'm right here, come get me." Well, he found out. All of this brings me back to why I'm here looking you in the eye on this cold Florida afternoon. You are the men and women who pour your lives and careers into building these incredible launch systems that we need, that give us that advantage. Whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Venezuela, whether it's halfway around the world, that's the advantage our warfighters need. And at the War Department, our job is to make sure you can do your job as efficiently and decisively as possible. Now, you can imagine that's a difficult thing for us. We're a giant headquarters, the largest headquarters in the world, and headquarters exist to move paper. The place where meetings exist to talk about other meetings. That's what the Pentagon can look like from the inside and the outside. Well, President Trump has directed us to overturn the way we are doing business. And that means not waiting years or spending tens of billions of dollars for some perfect solution 15 years in the future with a product that never reaches the hands of a warfighter. We tell our people, as I know you tell your people, do everything you can with the precious moments that we have. Rip out the bureaucracy, streamline the process, then get the products into the hands of our warfighters. We are changing the game, and urgency is our currency. Incentivizing speed, incentivizing efficiency, incentivizing competition. And we're not just talking about it, we're funding it in real time. The One Big Beautiful Bill invested $16 billion directly into our defense industrial base, expediting innovation to the warfighter, sending a clear demand signal to our best American innovators, like this one right in front of us. And like he would expect from all of you, we expect back to defense and the industries in defense, no more excuses, no more barriers to entry, no more monopolies. Guaranteeing that companies like Blue Origin in factories just like this one can compete. And yes, that means speaking some tough truths, as the president did when he signed an executive order on January 7th, ordering big defense contractors to be held to the highest of standards. No more egregious executive bonuses, no more stock buybacks, no more ridiculous CEO salaries when you can't even deliver weapons on time for the warfighter. The companies we invest in need to prioritize the warfighter. We need to put the warfighters first, just as you put your products every day first. And that's why it's an honor to look out at this great audience here of Americans who appreciate the spirit of that executive order. You see, I don't mind people making lots and lots of money. Please make lots and lots of money. But if you're going to do so, deliver for the American people and the taxpayers the capabilities you said you would deliver. That is something you do here. And so I hope you make lots of money. I'm telling the guy who makes a lot of money to make a lot more money. We love that. I'm a capitalist. We all are.
That was War Secretary Pete Hegseth on tour in Cape Canaveral, Florida, speaking to NASA and the Blue Origin workforce about the Trump administration's plan to dominate the space domain, communicating with industry to outcompete America's adversaries. Next, on to the economy. The dollar held on to gains today as investors weighed what a Federal Reserve led by Kevin Warsh might mean for interest rates. A rally on Friday followed President Trump's nomination of Warsh as the next Fed chair. Analysts see him as less likely to push for rapid rate cuts than other candidates. Commodity-linked currencies came under pressure as gold, silver, and oil prices fell. The Australian and New Zealand dollars both slipped, while the Canadian dollar eased slightly. Markets remain focused on key central bank meetings and economic data. And as mentioned, President Trump has nominated former Federal Reserve Governor Kevin Warsh to be the next chair of the Federal Reserve. Let's dive into what a confirmation could mean for the country with Ty Lassiter, the CEO of Lassiter Capital. Ty, it's great to have you on the show with us. Give us an idea of how a central bank headed by Warsh could affect the average American's finances, anyone from blue-collar workers to small business owners.
Kevin, thanks for having me on. And absolutely. So, I think Warsh was really public back in 2008 and 2009 in the subprime crisis, as well as his stance. And at that point, he was really against rapid and large interest rate cuts, more of a fear out of the inflation that would pursue because of that and because of the ease at spending. And so we've seen that repeated again here. I think what we have seen with our current Fed chair is a reactive approach looking at what happens in the economy first and then reacting to that instead of taking a proactive economic approach. And so I think obviously interest rates needed to come down. They came down way too slow at what they needed to come down to. I think we have seen them get to about a level that's a reasonable level because, I mean, let's face it, when interest rates are at or near zero, lenders have to push so much debt and they have to get money moving in order to make any money. And that's when mistakes are made. So there is a reasonable rate, and I think we're going to see that rate be somewhere in the fives. I think we're going to just have to get accustomed to that. As an investor myself who invests in real estate and deploys capital using debt and leverage, I can work with 5%. I can underwrite projects. I can look at assets and deploy capital when rates are in the 5% range. But what that does is that creates an opportunity for developers to get back and start addressing our housing program and our housing crisis that we have in America right now. And, you know, we've had inflation that was out of control, but that inflation also was impacting our housing market. And we've got just an unaffordability that is because of a supply and demand issue. We have developers that have not been building, and we have residents and people here in America that need a place to live. And so bringing interest rates down to a reasonable rate will allow us to start developing again and addressing that supply and demand problem.
So Ty, I follow what you're saying. President Trump wants lower rates. He's saying it's too hard for Americans to borrow money. As you were just touching on, we know that Warsh was a little bit hesitant to lower rates in the Great Recession. You know, there's some economists that point that out. But, you know, we just came off this pandemic, this inflation surge. What would that mean for maybe a Warsh Fed?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that it will mean is that we can see a little bit of consistency back in the economy again. We have not seen that even coming out of COVID. We had rampant government spending coming out of COVID. We had subsidies, and those subsidies created a false sense of wealth and or income, and that ultimately led to individuals buying and consuming more goods than they otherwise would have, coming out of a scenario where we were not developing product. And so we had a supply and demand issue. Then fast forward that into extremely low interest rates at the time and more spending. And so interest rates had to adjust in order to address the inflation. They went sky high, and I think they stayed high too long, ultimately leading to an affordability crisis across the United States. And so we're going to see under Warsh a consistency. And that is what we need to see. As consumers, as investors, really as anyone in America, we need some consistency. And I'm not saying that we cannot have zero inflation. There has to be some nominal amount of inflation, but it has to be consistent and reasonable that we can address and that we can account for. And then we have to be able to address the wage issue. And what we've seen with the border control that we've enacted under this current administration is that we are addressing the border issue, which is creating opportunities around jobs here in the United States, and then bringing manufacturing back into the United States addresses that as well. When you bring interest rates down as well, that allows developers and real estate investors like myself to deploy capital into a market that creates more jobs in America than anything else in real estate. So when real estate investors are actively pursuing and actively developing, we can much quicker address the job and wage issue as well, which creates more consistency in our economy as a whole.
Exactly, and that's what Americans want. Now, Warsh, just to point out and to add context, he said that the Fed's post-COVID response was the worst macroeconomic policy in 45 years. Now, a Forbes opinion article said they had mixed success, but I mean, it's over 20% cumulative inflation since the pandemic, so really a crunch. Now, some raise concerns about the independence of the Federal Reserve under Warsh. Is this a concern for you? How are you looking at things?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a human being fulfilling a role. And so I think there's always, no matter what, going to be some sort of an independence issue. And so when a Fed chair takes position, they are going to have their own opinions, and they either align with the current administration or they don't. And we're going to see those types of decisions made. And in this circumstance, they more closely align with the administration. And so we can expect that going into that this Fed chair is going to make decisions that are more in line with the current administration. But that's a human nature. At the end of the day, this is not a robot fulfilling a position. It is a human that has opinions. They may base those opinions on facts, and those facts are then led to them making decisions based on the way that they feel best at that time. And so, I think we've got an independent approach here, and it's as independent as it can be. But there is still a human nature involved. And I think that's a good thing. We have to have that because a human can adjust accordingly to the economy in a way that is from personal experience as opposed to completely taking the personal experience out of it.
Well, Ty, that's all definitely in your wheelhouse. Now, right to the heart of it, what does this mean for investors, this nomination, both institutional and private citizens?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Trump all along has said that his first approach and his first focus is Main Street. Once he addresses Main Street, then he can take care of whatever issues come from Wall Street. And right now, Main Street's biggest issue is inflation and the housing crisis. And so for investors, this is a huge opportunity to We've got an equities market that is trading at 4 and 5 times book value, specifically in the S&P 500. So we're at an all-time high. Now is the time to take some chips off the table, deploy those into physical assets that are real estate and physical assets where you can control and own something, not a piece of paper. Take some chips off the table, recognize your gains, and diversify at this point on a focus where the president and the Fed chair is focused on building out America right now, and that's Main Street, and that's going to be done through real estate. So we're going to see some opportunities over the next 6 to 12 months where investors need to take advantage. If they sit back and watch, they're going to see a correction in the market, and they're going to miss out on the opportunities that real estate is going to bring over the next 6 to 12 months.
Got it. All right, we just have 1 minute left. I want to talk about China. Warsh wrote an op-ed in 2021 in the Wall Street Journal saying that China is trying to, quote, replace the U.S. as the preferred destination for foreign capital. How could this recognition of China's goal play into his work as Fed chair?
Well, they were on a way to do that originally when we were the last people to reduce interest rates, and we had outside Chinese money putting their money into the United States. And what they're doing is they're bringing in outside capital, deploying it there in China, and then redeploying it here in the United States because they had lower interest rates than we did. And so we'll be bringing in a Fed chair that is going to address interest rates. We're going to be more in line with the global market, and it'll make local investors, U.S. investors, more susceptible to focusing on building out the infrastructure right here in our home country.
Understood. And Senator Jim Banks praised Trump's pick of Warsh and Warsh himself for that exact position on China. And Ty Lassiter, thanks for coming on. Great talk.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin.
And the latest data on U.S. manufacturing shows growth at its strongest point since 2022. The Institute for Supply Management released its manufacturing index today. It rose from 47.9 to 52.6%. And the figures greater than 50 mean expansion. The performance also beat predictions. New orders and production both had the strongest growth in nearly 4 years. Order backlogs and export orders also grew. A measure of factory employment rose to a 1-year high. The latest report comes after U.S. manufacturing languished for the past 3 years and contracted for nearly a year. The Department of Justice complaint against U.S. District Judge James Boasberg has been dismissed. In a December ruling made public on Saturday, the Chief Justice of the Sixth Circuit said the complaint was tossed because the DOJ failed to show evidence of misconduct. The Justice Department claimed that Boasberg attempted to improperly influence several federal judges in a closed-door meeting last March. He allegedly expressed concern that the Trump administration would disregard federal court rulings. The Sixth Circuit ruled that the alleged remarks were not prejudicial. Authorities in Florida today detailed the cases against a number of accused and convicted sexual predators. The state's attorney general was joined by local and federal authorities in Tampa.
To all predators out there, child molesters, traffickers, people that want to go after the most vulnerable in our state, that we take this more seriously than anything else. Going after predators is our #1 priority, and that is not going to change.
Florida's Attorney General laid out several recent cases. One individual who faced human trafficking and racketeering charges is scheduled for sentencing this week. In another case, a restaurant owner in St. Petersburg, Florida, was charged with 18 counts of possession of child pornography. In a separate case, the Florida AG said it was seeking the death penalty against another accused child sex offender. Coming up in tennis, Carlos Alcaraz upended Novak Djokovic yesterday and made history in doing so. NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss, so stay with us. Hey there, and now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. All right, Dave, we got some NBA news, but let's start in tennis first. As Carlos Alcaraz beat Novak Djokovic to win the Australian Open yesterday, what did you make of it?
You know, I wasn't completely stunned. I did pick Djokovic actually to win, so I was wrong on that. But, I mean, Alcaraz, he is the #1 ranked player in the world. But this was his first ever career Australian Open championship. And now he completes the career Grand Slam, having won all 4 of the majors at age 22. He's the youngest ever to do that. In fact, there's only 9 players ever who completed the career Grand Slam. Him doing it the youngest, very impressive. This is his 7th major win. Meanwhile, for Djokovic, he's won this event 10 times already. This is the first time he ever lost in the finals. Now, he actually did make Alcaraz work for it. He won that first set. He got an early break point opportunity in the second set. But really, from there on, Alcaraz just shut him down. I think it was 2 hours later, he got his next break point opportunity, that like late in the 4th set there. But by that time, Alcaraz had it in hand. He saved that break point opportunity, and he served, and he actually won the match just a few minutes later, though. So congratulations to Alcaraz there. He's a tremendous player.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it just fires me up.
The shots that he was making were just fantastic. I mean, not many people obviously make Djokovic, you know, not look superior, but he managed to do it. It was incredible.
And I mean, that's an iceberg. Djokovic's career, you know what I mean? You're going against
the
that.
best ever, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, now moving on to NBA news. 41-year-old LeBron James was named an All-Star reserve, extending his All-Star record to 22 straight seasons, Dave.
Yeah, you know, James did not make, he was not listed as a starter. That news came out maybe a week or 2 ago for the first time ever in his career. So we were wondering, is he actually going to play in the All-Star game this year? I mean, the guy is 41 years old. He's not putting up the same numbers that he once did early in his career. But for a 41-year-old, he is still putting up very good numbers. Around the season, 22 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists per game. And he got off to a slow start this year. If you remember back to October, he missed the first 14 games of the season with that sciatica problem. Didn't start till almost Thanksgiving. Started off slow in November, but he's really gotten it going this month. So it's great to see him almost back to form. I'm not sure what you say for a form for a 41-year-old. This is the best 41-year-old I've ever seen in the NBA, that's for sure. So the All-Star game, it starts February 15th, so that's 2 weeks from yesterday, 1 week from the Super Bowl. And they're gonna have a different format this year. Instead of the East versus West, it's gonna be US players versus the world players. And I gotta tell you, Kevin, there's a lot of good players who are not US anymore. I think the last 8 MVP awards have been non-US players, so.
That's really shocking.
That is shocking. Think about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's Canadian. Nikola Jokic, he's Serbian. Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's Greece. So, yeah, they've got the world players. They probably have a better team, I'd say.
Yeah, well, but James, I mean, you know, what do you say, GOAT? I mean, we got MJ. I'm not talking numbers. I'm just talking holistically.
Yeah, it's hard to say he's not the GOAT. I mean, he's the all-time career leading scorer in the NBA. This is the record, 22nd This extends his own All-Star game record, 22 in a row. It's hard to say he's not the GOAT.
Playing almost like he's in his prime.
I know.
In his 40s. Now, all right, elsewhere in the league, and the NBA over the weekend announced a 25-game for All-Star Paul George for violating the NBA's anti-drug policy. What do we know about this?
Yeah, not a whole lot, but Paul responded. He told ESPN, quote, "Over the past few years, I've discussed the importance of mental health, and in the course of recently seeking treatment for an issue of my own, I made the mistake of taking an improper medication," end quote. Now, it's going to be a very costly mistake, too. Paul's 25-game suspension is going to cost him approximately $11 million in salary loss. Now, meanwhile, his team, the 76ers, they're having a bounce-back season this year. They're 27-21 in 6th place in the East. They've got those 3 All-Stars, George, along with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. But for various reasons, those 3 have only played in 17 of a possible 48 games this season. And now that's out the window. I mean, George is not going to be back until March 25th. He already missed their Saturday game as the first game of suspension. March 25th, that's just 10 games before the playoffs start. So this definitely puts their team in a tough spot. So we'll see how this goes.
Well, Dave, thanks for keeping a close eye on this.
Hey, thank you, Kevin.
Excellent. All right, now visitors traveling to Milan for the Winter Olympics will have the opportunity to appreciate one of Leonardo da Vinci's hidden works. As a long restoration project continues, the public will have brief access to the space. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details.
Hidden by layers of paint lies one of Leonardo da Vinci's most detailed works. The vast painting spans across a ceiling in Milan's Sforza Castle. Small groups of visitors are being invited to climb the scaffolding and observe the work from just a few inches away.
This room was truly extremely unlucky because Leonardo never finished it. In 1498, he had to flee because the French arrived in Milan, and after that date, it was covered over, hidden. It became a military space. The castle became a barracks, and these paintings were covered with whitewash and plaster and forgotten.
A team of specialists is carrying out the restoration. Workers lean from 20-foot scaffolding, paying attention to every detail.
The room had barely been restored since the 1950s, so it was in fairly good condition, but there were signs of deterioration that needed to be addressed. First and foremost, the salts, which are those surface elements that literally and physically push the paint down and can risk causing it to fall off, as if it were a superficial film.
Their methods may seem basic, but their work requires precision.
As you can see, these sheets of Japanese rice paper are applied to the wall with demineralized water, and then literally, as if it were a sponge effect, it reduces and eliminates these superficial salts.
Restoration specialists tread carefully. This particular work by Da Vinci demands patience, with workers going piece by piece.
The hardest part is that Leonardo's painting is very delicate. There are some liftings, there are more fragile parts, and therefore the work must be done centimeter by centimeter, with the utmost attention and care.
The restoration is expected to continue for almost a year and a half. From February 7th to March 14th, a guided tour will allow visitors to get a closer look at the work. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Italy can be a romantic destination for couples looking to get away. This Valentine's Day, Olympic athletes will be in the country with a different purpose, winning gold at the Winter Games. But can they do both? American ice dancers Madison Chalk and Evan Bates think so. Take a listen.
I love an Olympic Valentine's Day. We don't really have any plans at the moment, so we are open to suggestions. But I think Italy is a very romantic place, so I'm sure we'll find some lovely Valentine's Day opportunities.
I think, we've always just tried to be ourselves and, be authentic and grounded and rooted in what we love, which is skating,
The opening ceremony for the Milano Cortina Olympics kicks off February 7th. Couples will only have a week until Valentine's Day once the games begin. With the holiday right in the middle of the games, competitors will be focusing on their events and their significant others. Winter will last a little longer this year. That's according to groundhog Punxsutawney Phil. His handlers replayed his prediction today at Gobbler's Knob in western Pennsylvania.
We look to the future and not just the past. So I suppose this party could use a forecast. It is my job this February 2 to look to the skies and report back to you that there is a shadow here on my ground. 6 more weeks of winter abound.
Tens of thousands of people visited Gobbler's Knob for the annual tradition that goes back more than a century. The 1993 movie Groundhog Day, starring Bill Murray, is also known for driving even more interest in the event. Last year's announcement was 6 more weeks of winter, Phil's most common prediction. Phil isn't the only animal being asked for the winter weather forecast. Groundhog Day events will take place across the U.S. and Canada. And if you have any feedback on the show or if something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'll cover more news right after this break.